So ladies, here's a question for you. Those of you who are looking for a long-term permanent relationship, looking for Mr. Right, which I think most of you are. And here's a question. Just how many frogs do you figure you're going to need to kiss in order to find your prince? Some of you are going to blow that question off, I know, and consider it facetious or rhetorical or what have you. Those of you who take it seriously might have a couple different answers. One of you might say, well, I only need to kiss one frog if it turns out to be the right frog. Someone else might say, well, I'm going to kiss as many frogs as it takes, and I know some women like that. They're still looking, by the way. Actually, there's an answer to this question, and I happen to know what the answer is. The answer to how many frogs must you kiss in order to find your prince is none. The reason for that is because in the real world, frogs don't turn into princes. And ladies, you ain't gonna pull a lake trout out of a catfish pond. And at the risk of really upsetting you, let me tell you a hard truth. You're unlikely to attract a lake trout if you're swimming with catfish. I want to talk a little bit this morning about truth, even if it's hard truth. I stand by what I'm saying and what I'm about to say, and I believe it's consistent with, frankly, the Bible and the way God designed it. The women's liberation movement, which has promised and claimed to have liberated you women, has actually turned, I believe, into a trap. And it fails to recognize the differences in design between men and women. It has promised you equality, not just under the law, but in terms of conduct. It claims to have liberated you sexually, brought you equality financially, and given you equal rights under the law. In point of fact, you now have the right to stand in the line of battle with a gun in your hand and take a bullet. That don't necessarily make it a good idea to do that, particularly if you're not inherently designed for it. Women's liberation, which started out probably in the 50s and gained traction through the 60s and 70s, and has now claimed to give you freedom, I believe has actually become a trap. And there's some reasons for it that I want to talk about for just a few minutes. You are now, in the age of birth control and abortion, and removing the stigma of multiple sexual partners culturally, it has given you sexual freedom, hasn't it? The problem with that is, as a man and as men, we no longer have to take responsibility for our sexual conquests. We don't have to marry you. We don't have to take care of your babies. We don't have to take care of your finances. And we don't have to take care of your emotional needs either. When things get messy, frankly, we can move on down the road. If you doubt that this is true, look around. We have a divorce rate of around 50%. Roughly 40% of children are being raised without a natural father in the home. The abortion rate, and particularly for black babies, is around 40% of all pregnancies. We've managed to butcher in the neighborhood of 60 million babies in their mother's womb since Roe v. Wade. If you think that's a good thing, you can probably tune me out and go elsewhere. There's lots of places on the internet and elsewhere that you can go to find comfort food that will tell you exactly what you want to hear. But in point of fact, the women's equality movement, particularly in the area of romance and sex, has liberated us men. It's now a banquet for us, and ladies, you're part of the buffet, whether you want to recognize that or not. The lie that has been foisted upon us all is that women, you can do anything that men can do and do it as well. The reason that's a lie is that we were designed by God as male and female to come together and form a permanent union and to become one flesh. The fact is, we are of equal value in God's eyes. Jesus went to the cross for all of us. And God designed us for certain roles, and He gifted us with what it takes to fulfill those roles. The way God designed us is to bring different but complementary parts together to form a whole, one flesh, a union which is stronger than the sum of its parts. And the way that works is by design. Men are largely designed to take care of things, to fix things, to conquer, to defend. And women are designed largely for love. In other words, we're designed to conquer, or to try to, and garnish the respect that comes from those efforts. And that is our basic need, is that respect for what we do. Ladies, you're designed for love, and the way that plays out is you're designed for relationships. And I believe that, frankly, you're a lot better at them than we men are. When we distort those characteristics and those built-in gifts from God by His design, what happens is what we're seeing around us. Ultimately, the logical end of all that is the destruction and collapse of our civilization and our culture. We can't sustain ourselves with an abortion rate approaching 40% of pregnancies, with marriages disintegrating at a rate of 1 out of every 2, with generations of young people being raised without both natural parents in the house, and all the other trappings that fall out from that. There's one other ingredient in all of this that I want to talk about, and that's in terms of how do we establish that permanent, stable relationship with somebody who's going to actually be our life partner and make that whole marriage worthwhile. It's important to fall in love, and sex is obviously a big drive. The problem is those feelings that are attached to love and romance and sex tend to rise and fall, and they tend to come and go, which means the feelings behind them are not stable. Sooner or later the glow is going to wear off, and it's going to need to be rebuilt or what have you. So a solid relationship needs to be grounded in something else. And that something else is to come into a covenant relationship of marriage between one man and one woman, exactly as God designed it and expressed it in the Bible. A covenant is the most ancient and sacred form of a contract. And when you come into marriage as a covenant, you're not grounding the stability of that relationship in your feelings. They're going to come and go. I don't care who you are. There's going to be days when you're going to wish you hadn't married the person you did, and she's going to wish she hadn't ever met you. And those days are going to come and go. But because it's a covenant, it's not grounded in your feelings. A covenant ultimately is grounded in the character and the integrity of the people entering into it. And it is stable for that reason if you're people of character and integrity. In my experience, in looking at divorced people over the course of a long life, I would say in virtually every case there's selfishness at play at the heart of the divorce. A covenant was designed in ancient times, before we had police forces and legal remedies to enforce contracts. And it was always grounded in an oath that the principals to the contract agreed to live up to. But you and I can't keep our word very well. We are weak. And if you doubt that, I would ask you to reflect on how many people you know that have made New Year's resolutions that have lasted through the month of January. So a covenant was always grounded in an oath, but it was always guaranteed by a third party in whose name that oath was taken. And that third party always had to be somebody in authority with greater power and authority than the principals to the contract, the people entering into it. In the case of a marriage, that third party guarantee is God himself. He designed marriage, and he intends for us to be faithful through life. He will guarantee our performance as long as we are people of integrity who have a bottom line which says, I won't quit. If you don't think God is invoked in your marriage, you're wrong. He's there whether you acknowledge him or not. And I think for us to find our prince and our princess requires us to be realistic. Realistic about the lies that have been foisted, and realistic about how covenants work, realistic about our feelings, and probably as important as anything, we need to be realistic about the genuine differences between men and women. We're designed to, as men, to earn respect from taking care of things, conquering things, if you will. Ladies, you're designed for relationships. That's specifically why in the book of Ephesians in the Bible, God says, men, love your wives, because that's what they require. And it tells women, respect your husbands, whether you think they deserve respect or not, because that's what men need, and that's what binds our marriage together, along with the integrity which says, I will not quit. So I hope this is useful, and thank you for watching.